Hello everyone, it's Annie and I'm here today finally with my September wrap up. So I read a lot of good books in September. I did have one 5-star, but most of them were 4 stars across the board. So we had a really good reading month this month. And of course for October right now I'm reading a lot of spooky books, but you'll have to wait until the end of the month for that wrap up. So yeah, I'm in a really good place with my reading right now. So let's get started with this huge stack. And Chickpea is joining me. Okay, so the first book you might be a little surprised to see on my channel. It is Midnight Sun. Of course, it is Edward's point of view of the Twilight book, the first book in the Twilight series. I recently was made to watch all of the Twilight movies by my girlfriend, and I like them. I still haven't read any of the other books, but we were both like, you know what, we want to listen to Midnight Sun together, so that's what me and my girlfriend have been doing. We listened to the entire 26-hour-long audiobook of Midnight Sun, and this has no rating, okay? This is the book that this month that I have not rated. Just because it's bad objectively. Like, it's so long, it is so repetitive, and Edward is such a bad person, but it was funny. So like, and it was enjoyable to listen together. So I'm not rating this book. I did read it. I don't regret it, but it's definitely not something I ever saw myself doing. So that's that. And then we have a very, very tiny book after that. It is Western Lane by Chetna Maru, and this was on the Booker Prize shortlist for this year. I don't usually read like all of the prize shortlists. I usually read the Women's Prize only, but I was interested in this just because it's about squash, which is a sport that I never knew anything about. And it was short and I needed like a break from Midnight Sun. So this is very interesting. I'm not sure I really understood exactly what it was trying to do or if it accomplished what it was trying to do. So it follows 11-year-old Gopi, who has been playing squash since he was old enough to hold a racket. But when her mother dies, her father enlists her in a quietly brutal training regimen, and the game starts to become her world. So if you like the book, what is it called? That book by Jade Song, where the swimmer starts to believe that she's a mermaid because it is like so all-encompassing in her life. I forget the, Chlorine. You'd like this. So she slowly grows apart from her sisters and her life is reduced to this sport. But on the court, she's not alone. She's with her dad and she's with Jed, a 13-year-old boy with his own formidable talent. Okay, so this is a coming of age story. It also deals with grief, and it also deals with, they live in London, or at least the UK, and they are an Indian family, but it also deals with like Indian and Pakistani relations. It's just a very interesting story. Definitely, like I said, deals a lot with grief, so if you're into books like that, definitely check it out. I do think it's worth the read. I haven't, like I said, read a lot of Booker Prize shortlist books, so I don't really know what to compare this to, but I think it was good, very different from anything else I've read. So another 3.5 is Into the Bright Open by Sherry Demeline, and this is a Secret Garden remix. If you're familiar with the young adult remix series, queer authors and authors of color kind of remix these old classic stories and make them their own. And I genuinely really love all of them that I've read so far, and this is no exception. It's a 3.5 because it just read very young. This is a YA novel, but the protagonist, I believe, is supposed to be 16 or almost 16, and she reads like a 12-year-old. And it's kind of starts to grate on you a little bit. If this was billed as middle grade, I would have no problem with it. It's just that when something is advertised as a certain age range, it needs to be written that way. So I was a little bit disappointed by that. But the story itself, very, very good. All right, so it's a Secret Garden remix. So this girl, she's rich, she's spoiled, her parents are kind of cold to her though, and then they die, and she's sent to live with her uncle that she doesn't really know, and the uncle's new wife, who isn't the one who's directly related to her, is like an evil step aunt. And I thought that her character wasn't very well nuanced. So that also kind of docked a little bit. She was just the very quintessential evil stepmom slash step aunt character. So it was interesting. So she comes in, she has this evil step aunt, and she finds this mysterious cousin that she didn't even know she had, who is kind of locked away in the attic because of a mysterious illness that she may or may not actually have. So there's a bit of Munchausen by proxy syndrome in there, which is always fascinating to me. And there's also the added intrigue because of Sherry DeMoulin being the author of the indigenous characters. However, I thought that they were strangely glossed over in this story. One of them is Flora. She is a servant in this house, and she was interesting. She kind of helps the main character, but then she gets fired because of something the main character does. And Flora's sister is the main character's love interest. So this is sapphic as well, which is great. I love that. But the love interest is kind of like this tomboy, like wild child. She like goes in the forest all the time and stuff, and she like shows the main character how to be like free and stuff. And I just felt like it was a little cliche. I thought that I would love to see more development of those two characters, but it was a very short book and it's YA, so I don't know how much I can really ask for, but it was good. I'm very happy that I read it, and I do recommend it. Now we're starting the 4 stars. So this is This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno, and this is also a tiny book. It's a horror book, and the synopsis is misleading. So the synopsis talks about how this AI, which is similar to Amazon's Alexa or Siri, has kind of started to take over this couple's life and eventually gets the wife killed. And it is about that, but only like the first third of the story. It then becomes this journey into grief. Okay, so this has really interesting things to say about grief and that journey. It is weird, but amusing. It's very strange. Yeah, Vera is killed, and Tiago's world becomes unbearable, and the only thing left to do is to move away as far as possible from humanity. But he soon realizes that there is no escape, not from his guilt, not from his anger, and not from the evil hunting him. So yeah, this is definitely not a usual horror book that I would read. At first I wasn't even sure if I was into it. It has an interesting narrative style where it uses you as Tiago talking to Vera, his dead wife. So he's like conversing to her even though she's dead throughout the book. And that was interesting. It was a little difficult for me to get into, but once I got into it, I really liked it. So yeah, this was definitely unique. We then have 2 short story collections. The first one is Every Drop is a Man's Nightmare. And this is something that was on my radar because I had seen it on lists of like Asian and Pacific Islander authors that are coming out soon. And just because the cover is so interesting. So these stories were very good. It is a short story collection, so it's not a 5. It's very difficult for me to give a short story collection a 5-star because, of course, some stories I like more than others. Let me see which were my favorite ones. So this story collection centers around people living in Hawaii, and it says it's described as a place where unruly sexuality and generational memory overflow the postcard image of paradise and the boundaries of the real, where the superstitions born of the islands take on the weight of a truth. Yeah, so that's an interesting flowery description that definitely fits the stories. So there's a really interesting story about how there's this corpse flower, and this man kind of grows from this corpse flower. It's really weird, but some of them are forgettable. There's one story that was, I think, my favorite one. It was sapphic. It's about this girl who, this is like a fictionalized, but not too fictionalized, post-apocalyptic Hawaii, where the US mainland had been bombing one of the islands for drills, and one of the displaced refugee girls got to live with this family on another island, and she and the daughter kind of fell in love with each other, and they had a very interesting relationship. That one was my favorite story of them all. It was just a very powerful collection, and I always want to read more Pacific Islander authors because it is hard to find. So I'm very, very happy that I read this. It's a 4, but maybe like a 4.25 too. And then the other short story collection, I had been wanting to read this for so long. This is Marina Enriquez, and this author I've also been wanting to read. She has another novel called The Woman of Light, and I really am interested in that, especially because I loved this so much. So this was a National Book Award finalist, which I didn't know. As a librarian, I'm kind of getting more into learning about all the different awards that books can win. So very interesting stuff, and this definitely deserves it. All right, so the titular story, Sabrina and Corina, is definitely one of the best ones here, I believe. It's about how they're cousins, I think, and one of them was like a wild child, and they had been really close when they were kids, but one of them kind of got in the wrong crowd and she ends up dying, and then the one who she had grown distant from comes back for her funeral, and it's very sad. Okay, a lot of these stories are very, very powerful and tragic. Okay, so I really liked it. I didn't note any other stories, unfortunately. This is a library copy, and I don't have those tabs, so I really should have thought about what my other favorite stories are in this. But just know that this is absolutely worth the read, okay? I mean, this cover is stunning, and it's just a great read. I loved it. I think I do want to make a video about my favorite short story collections, because some of them are just like, they just like blow my mind, okay? Because some of these stories in here were just like, oh my God, like you totally deserve all the accolades that you're getting. And like I said, it makes me want to read her novel, so absolutely pick this up. Now we have a book that has not technically come out yet. It is Bookshops and Bone Dust, which is the prequel to Legends and Lattes. So we all loved Legends and Lattes, of course, the sapphic cozy fantasy about an orc who gives up her life of fighting and war and being scary to own a cafe. In this book, it is the prequel to that. It's a 4, whereas Legends and Lattes was a 5 for me. So it's not quite as successful as its predecessor, but I liked it. I mean, it had the same vibe. I just think that it was like very much the same vibe, and I would have liked something a little bit different. I think that the problem for me was that since it's a prequel, you know where the story is leading, and therefore the stakes that are there are even lower than they really are, because you know how the story is going to end anyway. So the little romance that's budding, you know it's not going anywhere. You know, the conflict, while it's interesting, it's meaningless. So it's a cozy fantasy, it's cute. I think that the epilogue that was there, which kind of explains why the story is being told in the first place, should have been the prologue. That would have made a lot more sense. But other than that, it was a good, cozy sapphic fantasy, and I am very happy to see more of Viv and her adventures. Then we have a book that totally shocked me. It is The Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias. And this book, I didn't know whether I would like it or not, but I really, really liked it. I was hooked. Okay, this is a crime thriller, horror a little bit. It's wild. It is not something I ever would have picked up before now, but I really wanted some horror by Latine authors, so I was like, you know what, let's just get into it. And the ratings on Goodreads are not that great, but this book was really good, so you shouldn't listen to that. This book is about a man. The synopsis says that it's about a man buried in debt due to his young daughter's illness and his marriage that's kind of falling apart. His name is Mario, and he reluctantly takes a job as a hitman, surprising himself with his proclivity for violence. So that's the catalyst. It's not a spoiler to say that his daughter has leukemia and she dies within like the first 2 chapters of the book, which then spurs him to get a divorce, or at least a separation from his wife, and then it really picks up into the actual story, which is Mario agreeing to one final job to get money in order to win back his wife, hijacking a drug cartel's cash shipment before it reaches Mexico. So it's a wild ride. I'm not saying any more than that because there is just some wild stuff in here. The side characters with Mario himself is such an interesting character. A lot of these books explore grief. I don't know why that's such a theme this month, but this book handles it beautifully. The way Mario deals with, or doesn't deal with, the death of his daughter, and it's just absolutely wonderfully done. I would love to read more from this author. It really surprised me. I'm not usually one to pick up books about drug cartels and stealing money like that, but this was a very, very special book, and it's super creepy and just has such good vibes for the season. So absolutely pick this up if you're looking for a unique thriller horror novel for Halloween. Then we have another 4.5, The Haunting of Alejandra by V. Castro. This is thankfully not long. This was a beautiful book. It is horror, but it's light horror. This is a book about a woman who was haunted by the Mexican folk demon La Llorona. All right, this is literary horror, which I don't normally go for, but this one really worked. Okay, so Alejandra no longer knows who she is. To her husband, she's a wife, and to her children, a mother. To her own adoptive mother, she's a daughter. But they cannot see who she's become, a woman struggling with a darkness that threatens to consume her. So the start of this book is her being overwhelmed with the job of being a stay-at-home mother. She's very overwhelmed. Her husband is not the kindest, most understanding man, but she feels guilty about thinking that way about him, and she feels guilty for not wanting to do everything for her children unconditionally. And you know, it's just a very interesting way to start a book because she's in the shower thinking about committing suicide. So that's the way the book starts. And then it also has that theme of her being adopted, which is really, really well done. I thought that was a great theme in the book because it deals with motherhood, okay, from the other side. And it was just great. She ends up going to therapy, okay, and things happen, okay, because she has been seeing La Llorona, as the synopsis says, and she's trying to kind of break that curse. And it's so good, okay? It's a tiny, tiny bit queer, and it's great. I loved it. I did try and read another of V. Castro's novels. Well, it's a novella, I think, The Goddess of Filth, and I didn't really love it. But this one I loved. So I'm still on the fence about the author, but this one definitely makes me want to read whatever they come out with next. All right, and then my favorite book of the month is Of Time and Turtles by Cy Montgomery. This is my first book I've read by Cy Montgomery, who's a very famous nature writer, and this is really, really great. It's about turtle activists, and it also is kind of like a look at humanity and our lives right now, especially after having been impacted by COVID-19, and how we can live our lives at a slower pace and take some notes from turtles. So this follows, in Massachusetts, a turtle care center run by 2 trans lesbians, and I absolutely loved it. That was so great. They were such great people to follow and learn about, and you really saw how much they cared about these turtles, and it was just really interesting learning about the turtles that I almost wish there was more about the turtles themselves. because Cy Montgomery does a great job of weaving in turtle philosophy with human philosophy, which is interesting, of course, and I loved it. But I would have loved to learn more about the actual species of turtles, because they talk about all these species of like pets that people have abandoned that these people save, or turtles on the side of the road that, you know, are invasive or displaced and are like getting hit by cars, and they come back from these horrific injuries because of these people's care. And it's just so good and really warm, and just makes you really care about turtles. Like, I never really cared about turtles before, but now I'm interested in like the turtles in the pond outside. It was very interesting book. Also a pretty quick read, so if you're into nature writing and you want just a nice little nonfiction book, definitely don't miss this. This was a great book. Alright, so this is my September wrap-up. Thank you so much for watching. I had a great reading month, as you saw, but not too many 5 stars, so I'm hoping in October we can kind of break that and get a lot of 5 stars for me in the horror category. So let me know what your favorite book was that you read in September and what you're planning on reading in October. And thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel for more bookish videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!